Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to talk about some things that are basic to most kitchens. And just a quick disclaimer, I'm not promoting any products here. These are just things that I have in my kitchen, and I think most of you will have in your kitchen. So I want to give you a little not so secret about restaurant food. There's a simple reason why restaurant food tastes so good. And it's not simply because somebody else cooks it, serves it to you, and cleans up, although that's a big deal for the past year. The not so secret is two things that almost everyone has in their kitchen: butter and salt. Now, I know there might be some dietary issues with that, but those two things are pretty fundamental to cooking. So let's talk about those a little bit. Salt. The only salt that's ever used in professional cooking is kosher salt. It has nothing to do with religion. There are two reasons for this. Number one, there's no iodine in kosher salt. Number two, it's much easier to control. And so if we have some salt, let's take some salt, and if we're trying to salt something, it's much easier to control it because of the size of the flakes. So kosher salt, you can also, these are pretty popular these days, these grinders. They come for various salts, various peppers. I think, you can use those. It's not so important. As I think all of you know, there's been a tremendous explosion in salts in the supermarket. You go to any supermarket and you're going to see a ton of salts. Most of them are what I would call finishing salts. And by that I mean, so Himalayan pink salt is one of the famous ones, smoked salt, all those things. And they're fine. They're what I call finishing salts though. And what I mean by that is they're typically used after the dish is done and you're seasoning it before it goes out to the diners. So if you're cooking a piece of meat, a protein of any kind, you would typically use seasoned salt to do that. So I would only cook with the kosher salt. If you want to use the other salts, I think it's fine. Use it as seasoning at the end. Pretty much the same goes for pepper. You want pepper freshly ground. This is a pepper mill I've had for a million years. They also make these little things, and they make a medley of peppercorns. They make white and black peppercorns. Whatever you want to use is fine, but fresh is better. So that's the salt issue. Butter. Once again, this is the butter that I've used for years. It's a standard, pretty good butter. It comes in two types, salted and unsalted. Not a huge difference. The reason perhaps for using salted butter would just be ease of use. Unsalted butter, you have the ability to control the salt level in a dish. And sometimes for pastry cooking, unsalted butter is used a lot more. There are also what I think of as specialty butters, and if you haven't tried some of these, you should. Ireland makes them, France makes them. They're astoundingly different from the normal butters. So give them a try. We're going to use some of this later on in one of the dishes, and I can't have you taste it, but you trust me on that. The next thing we should talk about is oils that are used in a kitchen. So this is my collection of oils. I almost exclusively cook with olive oil and not extra virgin. Once again, I'm not recommending this, but this is what I use. I think that once again, I kind of think of it as a finishing item. This is extra virgin olive oil, but I never cook with this. And the reason I never cook with this is it has a distinct flavor. And when I cook, I want the oil that I use to not have a flavor and not influence the food. So it's always normal, if you will, olive oil. The other things are vinegars. I have a lot of vinegars. They all obviously taste a little different, but and it becomes a personal preference mostly. My favorite and my kind of go-to for a number of years is sherry vinegar. I just think it has a more distinct flavor. It's a little bit more nuanced, but you can use anything that you like. The one possible exception to that would be balsamic. And balsamic's an interesting vinegar and one of the only vinegars that actually ages. And so it has a strong flavor, certainly, but as it ages, it changes its consistency and becomes pretty thick. It's very strong and pretty thick. It would not be something I would use as a salad dressing, but one fun thing to do if you've never tried it is get some really good Parmesan cheese, break it up into little pieces, and dip it in some of this balsamic vinegar. It's really a treat. The other things that I typically have in my kitchen would be garlic. Fresh most of the time is better, but I also have and use quite frequently garlic paste. The same goes with anchovies. I buy the anchovies. These are flat anchovies, and the oil in this can is just as important as the anchovies themselves, because the oil can be used to make salad dressing. Also, anchovies come in a paste, which is fine sometimes. Tomato paste, useful, good product. And probably one of the last things is a good quality French mustard. This is a Dijon type mustard. Good quality mustard is always important to have around. So the last thing I want to talk about just briefly is wine. There's going to be times when you want to cook with wine, even with vegetables, and that's fine. And we'll probably do some later on in the day. However, you don't want to cook with wine that you won't drink. You can go to the supermarket and they have cooking wine. Don't buy that. Buy a wine. The wine you cook with doesn't have to be expensive, but it has to be good enough that you could drink it when you're through making the dish. Next time, let's talk about some common kitchen equipment. So see you then.